Hello, hello. Hey everyone, how are you doing? Hope things are going well. Running a little bit behind. Sorry about that. All right, let's see here. Just make sure things are going all right. All right. My. So tonight's class, we're going to be talking about basically textures, and we're going to be making a jewelry box, but we're going to talk about different ways to approach doing decorative textures, whether it be textures on the body, a lid, or you know, however, we're going to approach the different ways that we can look at doing that. Whether it actually be a texture that that is like almost like a hand-hewn carving, or if it's just a pattern, a geometrical pattern or something to create that. So some of you that have been with me for a while will know that we are, and hello, hi everyone, welcome, thank you. But some of you that have been with me since the beginning and all, you know, earlier on, we did a class on textures and things way back early on, and so we're going to recap on some of that as well. So let's get things opened up here, and hopefully that we don't have any buffering and streaming and all that stuff. And again, sorry, I'm running a little bit late. I was out there playing with that CNC of mine, that digital wood carver, trying to get that pedestal table carved. All right, now for tonight, this is going to be set up as a two-sided job, because if I'm gonna work with textures, there's on the jewelry box body, there's going to be grooves and things for the bottom of the box and stuff, as well as what's on the outer side. So we're going to go ahead and do a double-sided job. For the project blank, I'm going to go 24 inches on the x-axis, 12 3/8 inches on the y, and 3/4 inch thick. Now I'm going to be referencing off of the machine bed because I will be using my wedge jig and things, and I touch off onto the spoil board or the base of that jig. So I will be working off the machine bed, and I will be starting from the bottom left corner. For the flipping of the two-sided job, we're going to flip along the y-axis, and with that being said, we'll go ahead and click on that. All right. Now, with regards to the basic box and everything, hey Baron, welcome. Thanks for joining, everybody. And again, thank you all for joining me. With the basic box, I went ahead and drew it up in SketchUp, just the body, just to kind of get an idea of the size that I wanted to use. And I'm going to go with a 6x9 jewelry box, which basically is going to be roughly 6 inches wide by 10.5 inches long. Here's a very basic sketch of the box, and so there's no bottom in it. I'm just drawing the box and everything. So we're going to have just a very simple hinge lid for the oops. Let's get just a very simple hinge lid for the box, but overall the box size is going to be, let me get here, we're looking at about 7.5 inches wide on the outside, and it should be, I think I should be around 10.5 inches. Yeah, 10.5. And the height of the body of the box, we're going to go with about 3 inches tall. Now, with these parts and everything, on the inside of the box, let's see if I can move this out. On the inside of the box, there's going to be a groove, quarter-inch groove for a bottom panel and things. And as far as the inside, any dividers and all that stuff, that's, you know, that's up to you guys on how you would want to lay this out. I'm just basically making a very simple carcass. Now, with the with being able to use SketchUp and things, we're able to import the vectors from SketchUp, or you know, the parts from SketchUp into the program, which I've already done. I've got the parts here and laid out and everything, but just a recap on how you would import from Vectric. Basically, it's a vector. We would be importing the vector file, and on that we would come into the location. Let's see here. When you go to import, the import wizard for importing SketchUp files and all asks, do we want to do an exploded flat layout, or would we want to do a three-sided view? Well, this is flat parts. They're square parts, square geometry and things. If my part that I had drawn up had a decorative, almost like a molding profile or something to it, then I would probably want to bring in the three sides, which is the front, top, and side view. But with this, I can just do a very simple layout. All I need is the outlines of the parts, since they're going to be flat and things. Because SketchUp draws segments, you know, when it creates the circles and all, we want the software, we want the Vectric to create circles for the polygons that SketchUp creates. We want to keep our, if we do have components and things created in our SketchUp file, we want to kind of keep those you know, groups imported, those components imported, and we want to kind of keep them in a relative position. Now I only have 5 parts. It shows me here I have 5 parts to bring in, but you know, depending on the designer or the project on, you could have multiple parts coming in, and you may want to, when them to come in, you don't want them scattered all about in different areas. You want them to come in into relatively a you know, kind of keep them together in a sense. And so, you know, we would import that file and it would bring the parts in. And so the parts that you see here is the rectangle here is the lid. We have the two front and back, the front and back panel, and then we have the 2 sides. Now what you're looking at on this is basically the bottom side of the parts, right, or the inside of the parts, because we can see the grooves and things. And with us being a double-sided job, some of these vectors are going to go to the other side, and then some of them are going to stay on side one. So we are in the top of our project right now. We can tell that, identify that in the Vectric software by a couple of things. One, our ruler here is basically clear. If we were in the bottom side, it has that yellow coloring. It's just a visual identifier that we're in a different side of the project instead of the top. And the second side, the second way to view is if we come over to our toolpath side. In our toolpath area, it lets us know we're in the top. If we were in the bottom, if we toggled from the 2 sides, we'd be in the bottom there. Okay, so we're going to start off, everything is in the top now, and then we're going to move our parts over to the other side where needed and things. So let's get back over to our drawing side and let's take a look at what we've got. Now I'm going to ungroup my parts. So if I select on them, and I can go over to the ungroup tool under Edit Objects, or I could simply hit the letter U on the keyboard. U for ungroup, G for group, U for ungroup. Okay. Alright, so as we ungroup this, let's take a look at what we've got and how Vectric actually interpreted the files and drew them out. So we've got a boundary here, and because my box is mitered, it's got mitered corners, we also have, it shows the geometry of this little inner rectangle here, as well as this rectangle down here. Basically, these 2 rectangles that were created, and the rectangles I'm talking about, the pink areas that are surrounded here, They were simply created to create this line or this illusion of the miter here and things. But in the scheme of things, we're not going to be using them for anything. So essentially, if I wanted to, we could just very simply delete those rectangles and all. But I'm going to leave them in for right now. And then, of course, we have our groove rectangle here. This is going to be the 3/8 inch deep groove by 1/4 inch tall for the bottom of the box. Now, the parts are not done. I've still got to draw in the pockets and things, or the rectangles or the vectors for the pockets, where the hinges are going to go, the little mortises for the hinges and things on the top of the boards, and I'll show you how to do those, a simple nice little trick for them. But let's go ahead and get our parts put where they need to be. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to take all of my grooves, and I'm going to right click as holding your shift key to select more than one item. So with them all selected, I'm going to right click and I'm going to move them to the other side. I don't need them on the front side because they're going to be the bottom side grooves. So we're going to move them to the other side. Then I'm going to take my boundaries, holding my shift key when I'm selecting more than one item, and I'm going to copy those to the other side because I need the I need one set on the top and one set on the bottom for my profile cut. So we're going to right click and we're going to copy those to the other side. Alright, and yeah, man, thanks Wizard Woodworks, Sean Draper, I appreciate that. Click the like button. Appreciate that shout out. Now, as far as the lid, for the most part, everything that I'm going to be doing is on the top of the lid, but I do have, on the bottom side, I do have the little small, I want to call them mortises for where the hinge is going to go, the little small pockets for the hinges and all. So we're going to go ahead and take that and copy it to the other side as well. So what we should have here is, if we flip to the other side, we should have our boundaries with our groove slots, and then we should have our lid on our other side. That should be the only vectors we have at this time for the bottom side. And on the top side, we're going to have basically the same thing, kind of the illusion of our groove because of these rectangles, but we do not need the rectangles, so let's go ahead and get them out of the way to eliminate any confusion. Now, that being said, if we were going to actually run kind of a chamfered edge on this, a mitered edge, we do have gadgets such as the, oh, do I not have it in here? This is a new installation. So, but in the gadgets, if you do have Vectric VCarve Pro and Aspire, desktop doesn't have access to the gadgets, but if you had Pro or Aspire, in the gadget library there is a chamfer gadget, and you could actually use that chamfer gadget to create a 45-degree chamfer to actually create the miters. But we talked about this the other night when I was on the Dave Gatton show. If any of you watched that or participating, you want to use your tools the best way. You know, even though we can cut the miters, we literally can cut the miters in the chamfer on the CNC, it would be best that we take these parts after they're being milled and everything. We can take them over to our chop saw to cut the 45-degree chamfers on them. We can take them over to our table saw in that way. So I'm not going to go over that tonight. We'll, another class or something, we'll talk about chamfering and everything, or doing that type of setup using the chamfering gadget. But I don't want to confuse the issue or convolute it with showing you how to cut these miters on the end of the boards and things, because it's something that can easily be done with a chop saw or a table saw. So with that being said, now if I were going to use the chamfer gadget, then I would recreate these two lines on each end, and I'd basically create a rectangle boundary where my chamfer would be on these ends. The middle parts would be gone, but let's go ahead and get rid of them. so that we just don't you know, cause confusion. And the selecting, I'm just left clicking on the mouse and I'm drawing from right to left. You know, when I'm trying to select something, and remember, when you do that, whatever you draw over, it's going to select. So I'm just drawing over my two boxes that I don't need, to select them and get rid of them. So now, as you can see, you may be able to see clearly here that on the other side, now notice something is missing here. Bear with me. I'm going to undo my actions because I deleted that one profile. I was just talking about that and I did it myself. Alright, one more time, get rid of those. But as you can see on the other side, we have our let's call it it's a groove, not a dado, because it's going with the grain, so it's a groove. We have our groove slots and all. We're going to have to do some extending on them to extend them past the part and everything, so we can cut them out and run our, you know, our pocket toolpath and all. But they're on the other side, so now we can focus on the front side, and we can focus on what we're going to do as far as some decoration. Let's think about how we would approach, you know, doing some texturing and stuff. Maybe some nice texturing on the side, or nice, you know, texturing on the lid and stuff. Now for the side, for the sides and everything, I'm actually going to use the molding toolpath to help me create a nice curved profile on the sides of the body. And it's pretty much going to wrap around all of the edges. And I'm also going to show you how to use that technique if you wanted to do some feet, like an OG set of feet and things for the box and stuff. But let's take a look at how we would approach a nice curved body on our CNC. The first thing we're going to do is let's get out of our toolpath side over here and let's go over to our drawing side, to our line tool. And I want to create a line. I'm going to start over here on the far extreme left, and I want to create a line straight across, 0 angles to the right side, and spacebar to finish. And I want to make sure that my parts are in the right place. So notice that this part here is in the wrong place, and if I move it up, that's going to throw off my groove on the other side. That's one of the things that you've got to be aware of when you have a two-sided part. The way things are laid out, if you do any moving, you got to make sure that you go to the other side and you fix that as well. So what I'm going to do to make it easy on me, since this is the side I'm focusing on, I'm going to move to the bottom side for a moment, and I'm going to take my groove slot here and I'm going to move it back to the front, and I'm going to select this vector and delete it, get rid of it. As I go back over to the front here, I can now move this part as one piece, and I want to move it to where it's at the bottom of my line. Now that my part is in the proper place where I want it to be, now I can go ahead and take my groove and move it back to the other side, so it'll be in the proper position. But I don't want to just move the border and not the groove, and then all of a sudden when I cut, my bottom of my box isn't going to fit into place because one groove is higher than the other three, type of thing. So you got to be aware that you know, how things are interacting and stuff. Alright, so I've got my line drawn here, running across the bottom of the parts, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my parts here. I'm going to click on one of these, and as I said earlier, we're working with a 3-inch tall piece. Okay, so that is a very important number for me, because my profile that I'm going to create, my curved profile that I'm going to create, is going to, you know, needs to be, it's going to go the full distance, the full length, at 3 inches. So what I'm going to do is, off to the left, I'm going to move my mouse over to my vector, and I'm going to wake up this point on the corner here. And what that does is that gives me a guideline, a reference to work off of. So now I can come in and I'm going to draw a rectangle, and if I move my mouse over to the bottom of the side vector. It's going to give me my reference line underneath, and I can go ahead and create my part pretty much in line with my two side pieces here. And this part is going to be 3 inches tall, but I want it to be 3/4 of an inch wide. So I'm going to make sure that I change this to 0.75 and make that adjustment. Okay, so it's going to be 3/4 by 1 inch. Now, because I'm going to be sweeping this profile along this line to create that curve, and I'll be doing the same thing for these two parts down here in a moment, but I'm going to get this one done first because we're just going to copy that profile down to these parts down here, but we're going to focus on the two front and back parts first. But because I'm going to sweep this, the way the software looks at this profile, once I get the shape drawn that I want, I need to rotate this part 90 degrees, and it needs to be actually laying lengthwise, not vertically. You would think that we would be sweeping vertically, or be positioned vertically because we're sweeping horizontally, but it doesn't work that way. The part has to be laying actually horizontal to sweep along this vertical piece. So let's take a look at our profile. So I would like, and I'm going to go into node editing mode for this. Node editing is the second icon on edit objects. And on the bottom of the profile, this span, a span is a line between two nodes. We're going to right click and we're going to delete that span. Whenever you're creating a profile, you only need 3 sides, the top and 2 sides. You do not need the bottom part of the profile. So this is going to be basically, when I rotate this 90 degrees, this is going to be my top part here. But I have it positioned like this because I'd like to kind of gauge where I want my curvatures to be. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this line, this span, to a Bezier curve by right clicking on it and choosing to Bezier. And what this does is this gives me anchors that I can adjust my curve to and things. I can, how I want my body. And what I would like is I would like the box to be kind of fat at the bottom, and I would like it to come in and then curve in and start to curve in towards the top and things. And so I want to make sure that I want a nice curve, but I have to be mindful that whatever curvature that I'm drawing, that I'm actually changing my part width, because I'm bringing this curve out further now. So now if I measured from this point to the widest point out here, I'm more than 3/4, and I'm gonna have to make the adjustment if I select this part here, because this is the curve I want, just a very simple, nice gradual curve here. But if I come back into my size tool now, you can see that I've by bulging out this bottom part here, I've made my part more than 3/4 of an inch, and that is going to give me an error when I'm using the molding toolpath. It's going to give me an error letting me know that I'm exceeding my material's thickness, because imagine this being your board, your 3/4 inch board that we're carving in. From the top of the board to the bottom of the board is 3/4 of an inch. Well, if my part is 0.8635, then it's going to give me an error saying that my model is wider than the material. And let me show you exactly how that would look. So let's switch over to the molding toolpath. We're going to open up the molding toolpath, and first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my selected part here, and I'm actually going to use the number 9 key on my keyboard, and that will give me 45-degree turns. And I'm going to click the number 9 button twice on the keyboard, and that will rotate the part 90 degrees, 45 and 45 for each time you press the number 9 button. And I'm going to just go ahead and move it back up here just for visual. And so if I open up the molding toolpath and I select my line, this is going to be my drive rail, this line here, and I hold down my shift key and I select my part, the first thing I get, if you look to the right over here, is the cut depth exceeds the thickness of the material. We get that error. meaning that we have to adjust the height of this part. So we don't want to run into that error, so we just take care of it from the get-go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my size tool. I'm going to make sure that my X and Y are unlinked because I want to keep my width 3 inches, but I want to bring my height down to 0.75. Okay. Now, if by resizing this part that it shrunk down my curvature too much, you know, and I don't have the bulge that I want, well, I could also alternatively just cut off the extra, you know, amount of material that I need from the bottom of this piece. How would we do that? So if I undid this, if I came over to my guide rails and I touched my guide, I'm dragging a guide rail from the ruler. If I drag a guide rail to the top of my part and I right click on that guide rail and I tell it to make a relative guide rail 3/4 of an inch away, and now I'm going down, so it's a negative number, it's not a positive. Up is positive on the Y, down is negative, so I'm negative 3/4. When I create that guide, it'll create that guide there for me. And now I could simply come into node editing mode. I could click on my part, and on the guideline I could put my mouse, right click, and cut the vector on both sides. And by doing that, I can eliminate and delete those two parts. So I end up with a 3/4 inch piece. So that's an alternative way of resizing if your size tool happens to take away from some of the shape during the resizing, you know, like an automatically resizing. If it takes away from the shape, it squishes it down and all, and it's not what you want, then just trim off the bottom end. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and let's open up our molding toolpath. Let's take our profile guide rail, basically our drive rail it's called, that we're going to be using, and then hold our shift key down and select our profile. Now notice how the lines are shooting downward. That's not where I want that to carve. That means it's going to carve on this side of the line. I need it to carve up here. So what I need to do is I need to reverse the direction of that cut. So if I take and right click on this green node of my profile over here, I can click reverse direction, and if I come in one more time, oh, let's see here, bear with me a second, it's wanting to play. Let's actually reverse the direction here. There we go. You want to reverse the direction on the drive rail, not the profile. And so, all right, so with that done, very important here, a mistake that I almost just noticed. Look at what I've got going on here. I've got two parts that are upside down. My groove, if I look at my highlight on the back side, my groove on one part is on the top here, but it's on the bottom here. So if I were to create that profile and cut it out, when I go to put the box together, both the front and the back are going to be upside down, and my profiles aren't going to fit together. So what we need to do is we need to rotate this part, you know, basically 180 degrees. And what I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to take this, and once again, I'm in side 2 now. I'm in the bottom. Let's close this tool. I'm going to move it back to the other side, and then I'm going to take this part here and I'm going to mirror it, flipping it vertically. I don't want to create a mirror copy, I just want to flip it vertically. Alright, and now once again I can take my groove and move it back over to the other side. You always want to move your parts together if you're doing any moving, or if you're, you know, if you get the hang of the software, you mirror one side, make sure you go over to the bottom side and mirror that part as well. Just make sure that everything lines up properly. And what I'm trying to show you is just a safe and easy way. It's the safe bet to make sure that nothing comes out of place. Now, all right, let's get back to where we were. Let's go and create our molding profile. Almost had a mistake there. We're going to select our drive rail always first, followed by our profile. Your lines should be shooting upward, and notice how those lines shoot up to the height of the top of my part. That's letting me know that that's going to cut that 3-inch width across there. And so I'm going to be using an 1/8 inch end mill for this, most likely because this is just a very simple curve. I could use a 1/4 inch ball nose end mill instead of an 1/8 inch, you know, make the toolpath faster and all, but I'll use my 1/8 inch ball nose end mill for this project. And I'm going to calculate this toolpath, and we're just going to call this box profile. Let's see here. Let's call it box curved profile so we don't get it confused with an actual profile cut. And we're going to calculate that toolpath. Now let me go ahead and get rid of these 3 toolpaths down below. Can't jump ahead of ourselves. Delete all visible. Alright. So if I preview this selected toolpath, what we're going to end up getting is a nice curved profile. So I let it preview the cut, and let's move down to the along the x-axis of the table, and let's move this part over and point it down. So we get this nice, simple, subtle curve here, okay, for our part. And now when we do when it comes time to actually do our profile cuts of the 2 parts, if we took our 2 parts and we did our profile toolpath, cutting 3/4 of an inch deep, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill. I'm going to be cutting on the outside of the line. I'm not going to put tabs on this, but you would want tabs and stuff for your parts and all, but I'm not going to put tabs on this so I can remove all the waste material so you can see the actual parts themselves. We'll talk about ramps and leads and things as well when we do our actual, you know, real tool paths. But I'm going to calculate this tool path, and I can now preview that tool path to cut the parts out. And if I get rid of the waste material, and let's zoom in and everything, we can get that curved profile. But you know, one of the things that I actually liked, if we were to reset this preview, and just preview that curved profile again, imagine that this whole part from the bottom of this cut up to the top of the part where the router bit is heading, imagine if that was my whole piece. I actually kind of like the way it curves and then goes into this flat part here, this flat lip. So if we look at this, it kind of curves and then it steps up and then it's flat across. I actually kind of like the way that looks. So I'm going to emulate that. Let's go back over to our drawing side. And let's come in here to the top of my part, and I'm gonna go into node editing mode, and right about, I could be precise with a guideline. Let's say if I grab a guideline and snap to this corner here, I can right click and say I want to create another guide. I'm just gonna do, let's go a 1/2 inch lip. So we're going to the right. To the right is a positive number, to the left is a negative number on the x-axis, so we'll go 0.25. Did I say 1/4? I think I said 1/4. Yeah, we'll go 1/4. Nice little lip there. And so that'll give me a point to put a node. Okay, so I can, back into node editing, I can come here and it wants to click on that guideline there, so I got a general reference. I'm gonna actually move the guideline out of the way, and I got a general area where I want it to be, because every time I try to put my mouse on there, it wants to move that node over. But I'm going to show you a neat little trick. Let's go into node editing, and on this curve here, right about there, we're going to insert a point. Right click and insert a point there. Alright, now on this point, let's get rid of the guidelines for a minute. View, guidelines, delete all guides. I want this point to be straight in line with this corner here. So I'm going to select this corner first, hold down my shift key, select on this point last, and I'm going to hit the letter Y on my keyboard, because Y is represented by up and down. So if I hit the letter Y, it will pull that into alignment. Now this curve here I don't want, so I'm going to right click on this span and change it back to a line. So we have that line. Now I want this curve to come down and a little step up to this here. I don't want it just gradually going right into that curve and then flat. I'd like a little step up. I like that. I like the look of that little lip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a small amount, and I'm going to right click and insert a point there. I'm going to pull that point pretty much straight down, however much I want the lip to be. And again, I'm going to change this span between these two nodes, right click and change it into a line. And then if I select this node first, this node second, holding the shift key, now I'm moving left and right. That's represented by the x-axis, so if I hit the letter X, it'll pull that into alignment with that first node that I selected. So now I've got this nice little step down and curve, and I'd like a little bit more curve here in the body, so I'll take this anchor here and I'm just going to pull that curve in a little bit more. So I got a nice little curve there. Alright, looks good. Now we're very simply going to recreate that toolpath. So I'll get rid of this one. We don't need to confuse ourselves. And if I open up the molding toolpath, I select that drive line, hold down my shift key, grab this profile here. I can calculate that toolpath, reset my preview, and preview the selected toolpath. Nice. That gives me, if we zoom into it here, that gives me that little step up. Not as dramatic as what you see on the edge here, but it still gives me that nice little flat profile, so that when I run my profile toolpaths, get rid of my waste material. You know, we've now got these, let me see if I can get this to turn without buffering on you guys, taking up too much 3D. But now I'm going to have a box that has this nice curved body to it, and it'll have this nice little lip across the top. I mean, I could have gone, you know, even more down at the bottom. I could have created a couple of beads, you know, running across the bottoms, or maybe almost like a OG style profile or something, to where the, you know, it kind of stepped in. You can be creative as far as that goes for creating, you know, what you want, but why stick with the boring square body when you can create a nice curved profile and things for all of your parts? So let's go back over to the drawing, and let's kind of also make our parts here. What I need to do to get these two parts to cut the same is, the first thing I need to do is I need to mirror them, because I want them pointing up, or I need to reverse my profile where my lines are pointing down. Either way. But what I'm going to do is, to keep things consistent, I'm going to mirror my parts so my grooves are facing upward, so that way everything is consistent and less confusing. So what I'm going to do is go back to the top side, take my two pieces here, move them back to the other side. And if I would have thought in advance, I wouldn't have had to do all the move back and forth and all. But now I've got my two parts. I can mirror this part, flipping it vertically. Same thing here. Flip it vertically. And then once again, select my 2 grooves and put them back on the other side. Move to the other side. Now all I have to do is make sure that the line that I draw my drive rail for my profile, just need to make sure that it exceeds and goes past my part, you know, a little bit. And I'm going to be using the same profile, so I don't need to make a copy of it or anything. All I need to do is come over here, go into the molding toolpath creator, and I could have done all 3 of them at the same time, but you know, for educational purposes, we're going to do a second toolpath, one at a time here. First profile here. Again, we got to take this node on the drive rail here, right click and reverse the direction. Same thing here, most likely is going to have, oops, one at a time. You do have to create one at a time. Same stuff applies. So all I have to do is hit calculate for that. Let's go back over to the 2D view and we'll go ahead and create this toolpath as well. Select our drive rail, followed by our profile. Again, reverse the direction. Right click on that green node and reverse the direction and calculate the toolpath. So if we reset our preview and we had all of our swept profiles selected and we previewed those, we would have, how about let's select them again and preview all the visible. Now while that's calculating or cutting out, let's take a look at some questions here. Would you need to resize the top at this point? Reclamation Woodwork, Dennis, is that you? Reclamation Woodwork, I think it's Dennis. Dennis, with regards to the size, were you referring to because I did the curve, I made it bigger than 3/4 of an inch, and so therefore that's what I was talking about cutting the bottom off? Was that question asked at that point, or were you referring to something else? All right. And so we've got our profiles there, or I'm sorry, our swept profiles, our molding shape. And if we took our parts here, I'm just going to open up the profile toolpath and I'm just going to add these 2 guys into it because they're all the same, and just calculate that toolpath. And therefore, if you know, we previewed that toolpath and we cut out the parts, we would have our front, back, top, and side for a nice contoured box. And everything. And then we would take these parts over to our table saw or our miter saw. We would cut our miters in the ends of the 4 pieces and have a really nice curved box profile and things. And of course, I went very subtle with my curve. You could go much more dramatic and things and really just make it stand out. And you know, but that's one way. So this isn't necessarily a texture, but in a way it is. We're creating a profile or something. We're creating a different look for the side. Now we're actually going to create a textured sides, top and bottom and everything and all, but I wanted to get you here first to show you how to create those contours and all and stuff. So, oh, JB, I'm sorry, JB. I don't know why I keep getting you and Dennis confused on your screen names and stuff, but how's it going, buddy? All right, so hopefully you guys understood that, and maybe it gives you something to think about when, you know, when making your boxes. And remember what I told you about how I would show you, like if you wanted to make some decorative feet for your box and stuff, how you could use the same technique for that. Let's take a quick look at one of the layers that I've got laid out here, which is my foot styles here. And let's turn off the other layer 1. Let's see what's hiding from here. Let's turn off layer 0 and come up to our foot styles here. And let's look at my feet. All right. So let's look at this image first so you can kind of know what I'm referring to. But you ever seen on the bottom of furniture, not just jewelry box, but the bottom of furniture or things, you got this nice OG foot. You know, two parts mitered together, mitered and assembled or glued together, and glued on the corners of the foot. It's a really nice decorative foot. So how would we attempt to make that in here? Well, we would use our same swept profile technique that we did. So here I've got the OG feet, and I also have a different style down here as well, but we'll look at the OG feet. And I've got my drive rail. Okay, so now my drive rail doesn't need to be this long. I only need to just make sure I'm going past my parts, but you know, I made it this long just to show you. But if I go into the swept profile toolpath and I select this drive rail along with the curve, and I want this OG foot to bulge out at the top and curve in, or basically bulge in at the bottom or curve in at the bottom. I'm getting tongue-tied here. Curve in at the bottom and bulge out at the top. And also, there's a very subtle foot, a very subtle flat part here. And so if I select my profile and I calculate this, and I'm just going to call this OG foot, and this is only one foot. These two parts here, you would have to cut multiple parts to make all 4 feet. But OG foot, and that's why I say foot, not feet, because it is one part. You're going to be mitering and gluing these together. So if we calculate this, and let's reset our preview back to a blank board, and then if we take our let's turn off that toolpath for a minute. If we take our 2 feet here and create our profile toolpath, again, rinse and repeat, guys. That's what's so great about the Vectric software. The profile toolpath I created a moment ago. The same applies for this, so you know, we can go with that. The only thing is I have some small details in this foot, so I'm not going to use my 1/4 inch bit. If I were to, my 1/4 inch bit wouldn't fit. The radius is too small to fit in some of these areas, and I would lose that detail in the foot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my 1/8 inch end mill, and my 1/8 inch end mill has a inch and 30/32 flute on it, so I can cut through 3/4 inch material with it, no problem. And so I'm going to be on the outside of the line. Again, we would set up some tabs, but for the class, I'm not going to set up tabs. We'll do that at the very end when we create our final profiles. But we're going to calculate this toolpath, and if we look here, let's do the swept profile first to create that big dramatic sweep, and then we'll cut out our feet. Let's get rid of the waste material. And if we move around here, bear with me while I oscillate myself around. On the front of these feet, if you should be able to see my mouse, and let me zoom in really big, and let me see if I can get this thing to stand up better. Work with me. That's good there. Alright, let it recycle itself and zoom in. On these feet, we're going to be mitering. This is our front edge here. Okay, so our miter cut is going to go from the front to the back. The long point of the miter is the front of your foot, where the profile is. So if I turn this around, let's see if I can get into a better view. Bear with me while this pixelation is killing me. I'm in a very low resolution to try to keep my screen from buffering on you guys. Oh. Alright, when you lose your part, bring it back into view. Alright, I want to swing you around. So come around nice and easy. Oh, you're going to fight with me. There we go. There's a whole board here, but I'm only working with a small corner of it, so it's not rotating like I would like. But this should be, I should be in the right position now. Close enough. I'm at the bottom of the foot, but so the front of the part, we're going to be mitering back. That 45-degree miter on these ends and things, and you know, you can cut them on the table saw, your band saw, your chop saw, however you want to do it. I ended up making a jig for mine, cutting out a kind of reverse profile, so I had something to attach these to for holding, so I wasn't so close to the blade. But they would then be glued together. Those miters would be glued together to create this part. And now if you look at the back side of the foot, there's a small square piece on the back that's glued to the back of this to reinforce the structure of the foot and also give the foot some more base, because our front of our box you know, would be running along one of these legs and the back of the box would be running along the other. And in the bottom, this extra little block back here, a little piece of scrap wood, it's never going to be seen. You can use the same material, but this is glued in, you know, to the foot to reinforce the foot. And so, you know, that's one, you know, style of OG foot. Now, imagine if we just took a very simple, you know, profile like this, and we created just a very simple bulge profile. Then we could come in and let's select our drive rail followed by our profile and calculate that tool path. And let me rename this. This is going to be a, I'll just call it a bulged foot. I don't know, bulged. We'll just call it that for what it is. And again, we're going to switch around to the x-axis so we can see what's going on here. Tilt this down a little bit and preview that tool path. That's going to create just that bulge, just that simple bulge there. And then when we create our profile cuts, I'll make another profile toolpath for it. You wouldn't have this many toolpaths, you know, for all these parts. I'm just creating a bunch to create. We preview that profile toolpath, cut those two parts out, and so we have these bulged feet, and these bulged feet here. That gives us a nice curved profile. And again, when we miter the two parts together, now we're going to have these bulges. And these feet, since our jewelry box is going to have a curved body, these feet might be more appropriate than the OG feet. But this is something just to make a nice decorative mitered foot, you know, 4 feet that sit on the corners and stuff. Just something to think about. It gives you something to, you know, experiment with. And now scale this up. You've got, you know, nice decorative feet for furniture, tables and things like that and all. And now you know how to utilize the molding tool path by creating a profile, a swept profile, and then a profile cut of the actual shape. You can create some really nice decorative feet, box sides, whatever the case may be. You don't have to go with just a plain Jane square box. You know, you can give it a little bit of character. All right. So, any questions on that part up to there? If you have any questions up to that point, fire away in the chat room. And while you do that, I'm going to go into my layers and shut the fit picture off and my feet style layers. Okay. And let's talk about Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about our box here again. All right. I don't see anybody, unless I'm froze up. I don't see anybody typing yet, so I'll make sure to check. Can you show us how to estimate cut times on this? Sure, Dave. So on the estimated cut times, in your toolpath side of your software, you have a little clock here. And this is the estimated times of your cut. And if let me turn off all of these toolpaths here. You generally will most likely be running inches per minute. And you want to put the rapid rate of your machine. Now for digital wood carver owners, the 2440 is 150 inches a minute. For the mini carver, 125 inches a minute on the rapids. And then the scale factor for both machines is 1.3. Now that 1.3, basically 1, would represent, like if I carved this toolpath and this time told me it was going to take 30 minutes, and I carved it on my machine and it took exactly 30 minutes, my scale factor is 1. Okay? If it took 60 minutes to run on the machine, then my scale factor is 2. If it took, 45 minutes, then my scale factor is 1.5. So that your scale factor is determined by the actual running time versus what the time that the software estimates. For us, the digital wood carvers, our scale factor is 1.3. That'll give us the most accurate representation of our cut times. So let's look at our body, our profile cuts. For all 4 pieces of the profile cuts are going to run about 14 minutes. And the swept profiles, now this is based on my bit and everything. All together, start to finish, it's going to be about a 4-hour run, 4 hour 46 minutes. And that's because I'm running my feed rates for my 1/8 inch. I'm using an 1/8 inch ball nose to begin with. I could use a much bigger bit. But my 1/8 inch ball nose is running 50 inches a minute. I could ramp that up since it's a very simple cut. I could ramp that up to 60, or more. But I'm running 50 inches a minute on the ball, 20 inch a minute plunge. So therefore, we've taken that into consideration. My step over on my ball nose bits, my step over is only 8%. And if I increase the step over, not to sacrifice the quality of the cut, but if I increase the step over from that 8% to maybe 10 or 15%, that's going to reduce the time as well. But right now, for me to cut this box out, or the 4 sides at least, it's going to be about a 4.5 hour run. Okay? And you can adjust or modify those toolpaths accordingly. To optimize them. You can change your speeds and adjust your speeds and feeds, your step over, your pass depth, all of that stuff to help clean that up. So that's how you would estimate time in this with the clock here. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about texturing. Now we could do some really funky texture, onto our parts here, and we could I want to believe if I look at my, let me make sure that if I'm wrong. Yeah. See, a swept profile, even though it's a 3D model that's basically generally being created, it's not an actual model component that you would see in our component tree. Okay? So therefore, with that, and let me make sure I'm not wrong. Let me make sure that I didn't accidentally have the models on a particular layer or something and had them turned off. So bear with me a second. All those layers are turned on. Yeah, I didn't think so. So the swept profile, even though it's a model, it's not a component. And therefore I can't project the toolpath onto my profile here to get it to follow that curve. So I've got to kind of figure out a way to get that texture built into the curve. Well, the easiest way to do that is to actually draw the texture in here to create some unique profiles and things. Actually draw it into the sides and stuff. But I want, instead of doing that, I'd love to see what a creative decorative texture looks like. But I don't believe, even if I project onto the 3D model, I don't believe that it'll actually follow the contour. So let's actually test the theory. So if I select my vectors here, I have to be mindful that I have that square lip up at the top that I want to keep. I don't want my texture going into that. I just want it to follow that curve. So what I'm going to do first and foremost is I'm going to measure this lip here so that I can make sure that I create a rectangle up there to represent it. So I'm going to do a horizontal measurement. So it's 1/4 of an inch. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I draw a rectangle across the top of my parts. That's going to be a 1/4 inch tall. And I'm actually going to go 0.3. I don't want, 0.3 is going to be good. And this is going to, the only purpose that this is going to serve is a boundary. Okay? And I really don't need the small rectangle. I don't need the small rectangle. I actually need to create a boundary where the texture is going to go. So let me just draw a rectangle across the bottom. That way the texture will stay within that limit. We'll do it that way. And I'm going to let it go past the part a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of, bear with me a second. Let's turn this off and there we go. So I'm going to use this as my texture boundary. And so with that selected, I'm going to go into my texturing toolpath and I'm going to have the texture start at 0, the top of my board. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch ball nose. I'm going to kind of do like a hand-hewn, hand-carved type texture. I don't even think it'll look good on the side of the box, but it would look good on the top of the box. But I don't know how it's going to look on the side, so bear with me on this. I'm going to let it carve 1/8 of an inch deep, varying between that and a 1/16 of an inch. My cut lines, I want long sweeping lines, so let's go with a 3-inch maximum cut length to about 1.5 inches short. I want the lines to overlap, and a 10% overlap is a good overlap for me. I'm using a 1/4 inch ball nose for this texture, so I want my step over to be half the diameter, so it's going to be 1/8 inch of the radius, and it's going to vary between that 1/8 inch and a 32nd. And do I want them to go straight, or do I want them to kind of have a little bit of an angle to them and kind of be a little bit randomized? I'll go with a slight 5-degree angle. No, actually I'm going to go with a 0 angle. I'm going to go straight across and have that texture, because I've already got the curve of the body. I don't want to throw too much into it. Alright, so with that, I want to be away from the boundary a little bit, inward. I'm just going to go a 1/16 of an inch. I don't want the bit going right up to the boundary line. No, actually, I do. I want it to go right at the boundary line. And now I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna project it onto the 3D model, but I don't believe that it will. Let's reset the preview. Yeah, there's no 3D model in here, so it's not gonna curve with it. And therefore, that means that this technique, if I was in Aspire and I could create my 3D model, you know, that would be fine. If I had an STL of the foot or something, that would be fine, or that curve. But because it's not a model, it's not going to texture, because that's a shame too. But let's take the curve out of the equation. Let's take the curve out of the equation. Let's preview the selected toolpath. That texture, that randomized texture. Okay, and let's look at our profile cut. Yeah, taking the curve out, it would have been silly to have the texture follow the curve anyway. Oops, and I got to make my texture for the bottom parts. So let's actually do that. Let's go back into our texturing toolpath, and once again, remember I'm staying a 1/4 inch away from the top of the part. So I'm using a rectangle to help me find my 1/4 inch. 0.25. If I hold my, while I'm in transform mode on this rectangle here, while I'm in transform mode, if I hold my control key down, I can drag a copy up here. This is a temporary rectangle just to give me my 1/4 inch. And I can snap there. And now I can draw my boundary. I'm waking up that vector to get that reference line. That's that smart snapping that Vectric 9 offered, and again in 9.5. And now let's go ahead, and in our texturing toolpath we will select our boundaries for those and calculate it all at once. And let's preview both of those, and so we can create a nice looking box body with some, you know, a nice just a hand carved texture and stuff on it as well. You know, and I'm leaving that little lip at the top. I like that little straight edge and all. I probably should have done it at the bottom too, so the texture was just running down the middle of the piece. That would look nice. Let's get rid of those and zoom in here. And so, you know, imagine the box being the sides of the box and everything having that nice texture in there. Now alternatively, we could use the texturing tool over here, the draw vectors, but this creates a series of waved lines and things, and so I prefer the texturing toolpath, which is more random. But if you want something a little bit more consistent, a little bit more flow consistent, then using the vector texture patterns would be better. Meaning that with those vectors selected, if I come in and create a vector texture pattern, 0 angle on the lines, the maximum spacing between the lines, I'll go a 1/2 inch is fine. Amplitude, let's go 1 inch. No, let's go 3/4. And for the wave length, those waves and all, I actually kind of want them almost to follow the whole line. These parts here are 7.5, these parts are 10, but that's all right. We'll meet in the middle. Let's go a wavelength of 3 inches, and let's preview that. And that'll create these wave patterns here, you know, these vectors. And so with those vectors, I could come in, and with this, I'm kind of, you know, they are open vectors. Okay, they are not closed. So it's a profile toolpath, and I'm either going to be carving on the outside of the line, on the line, or, you know, on the inside of the line. In this case, I'm going to carve on the line, but I'm going to use a wide diameter bit. I really want to kind of make a nice texture here. And so the cut depth is going to be, it's not going to be random. That's what that, you know, we don't have that texturing option, that kind of texturing option. So the cut depth, I'm going to go, oh shoot, let's go 1/8 of an inch. That'll be good. For the bit, I'm going to use a wide bit. Bum, 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 bum. I don't have a wide bit in this toolpath because I just updated the software and I forgot to put my tools in. So I'm going to create a new tool. It's going to be a ball nose, and I'm going to do a 1/2 inch diameter ball nose. Stepping over, 10% is fine for that, pass step. That ball nose can go, I'm going to go the full 1/8 of an inch, one pass. 50 and 20 is fine. And so if we calculate on the line, let's see what we end up with. Let's reset our preview. Preview. Our funky random profile. It's a little too neat. A little too neat. I like a little bit of noise in the lines and things, but let's cut it out. Let's see what it looks like if we cut it out. It's just a little too neat, too nice and straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that up a bit. Yeah. Interesting look, right? Interesting look and all, not bad, but it's a little too neat. I need a little bit more randomness. So let's go back over here, and on our vectors, we're going to add a little bit of noise into the mix, and that noise is going to, you know, randomize that a little bit more. And what I was missing is I didn't have my vectors selected, so bear with me a second. Alright, so let's preview that again. There we go, limit it to that. And let's add a little bit more noise. I want some more randomness in here. And on my line spacing, if I'm using a 1/2 inch diameter bit, I'd like a little overlap, but no, I actually don't want that much overlap. So I'm going to actually go 0.625 instead of a 1/2 an inch. There we go. A little bit more noise. All right, so let's take and, oh, you son of a gun. Don't do what I just did. Always click apply to save. Always click apply, ladies and gentlemen. To lock that in. And there's a lot of noise there for sure. Alright, let's create our profile toolpath on that. Still going to use my 1/2 inch ball nose. You're going to get a different texture whether you use a V-bit, a ball nose, you know, of different sizes, end mill. So each thing is going to be different. I kind of like the smooth bottom and stuff, so I'm using ball noses. And a 1/2 inch ball nose, imagine a 1/2 inch ball nose with this, you know, these tight little radius lines, all this noise and all. It's going to randomize it for sure. So let's take a look and see how it looks. And this is another thing, I like the lines being mixed and matched, but you know, with the profile toolpath, or you know, this tool, this texturing tool, it doesn't really give us that kind of random pattern. You know, it's just straight lines and all. That's why I prefer the texturing toolpath over this. Let's cut the parts out and let's see what we've got going on here. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this texturing tool. There's a time and a place for it, but this is neither the time nor the place. But you know, hey, I mean, imagine that mitered and all. It'd be a rough looking, you know, just something out of the norm. I'm not a big fan of the texturing tool, but there's a time and a place for it. All right, I don't want to waste any more time on that tool because I'm not a big fan of it. Get rid of it. All right. So we've created, let's get rid of our funky textures. Alright, so I should have those are my feet toolpaths, all that wonderful stuff and all. Wonderful. Now let's actually talk about patterns, geometric textures and patterns and all. And your guys are, you know, probably wondering, when in the world are we going to build the box? Well, the box is done. It's just profile cuts and pocket cuts. We still got to do the other side, which is a pocket cut. But right now we're focusing on the texturing. What is this box going to look like? What is this box going to look like when we cut it out? You know, we're going to give it some style. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my boundaries that I was using for that both of those textures. And I'm going to create a small band that's going to be have a height of, I've got a 3-inch box, so I'm going to go about 1.5 inches, 1.5, actually 1.25 tall. And I want to make sure that this is centered. So if I select this rectangle first, my band, let's call it my band. Select this first, followed by this rectangle last. I can come into my alignment tools and I can make sure it's centered, which it is. And if I double click and put it in transform mode and I grab this middle box here, or one of the ends, it doesn't matter, the center on the end. If I hold down my control and alternate key and left click and pull over, it will restrict me to this axis, to this linear motion, whether I'm going horizontally or vertically. It won't let me go. It restricts me to a vertical or horizontal. I can't, you know, for alignment purposes and all. So the alternate key does that. And now again, I'm going to grab the center. I'm gonna hold my control key to make the copy, but I'm not gonna use my alternate key because these aren't centered exactly. But I'm gonna pull this down and I'm gonna find the center of that box. And how can we identify the center of the box? We'll watch the cursor, and as I move, that cursor mouse will get a circle with a dot in it, like a crosshair of a firearm, right? So that lets me know I'm centered. Now, of course, I want to hold down my shift key and grab my size controls and pull in. And the same thing up here. Double click to put it in transform mode and pull in. Alright, these bands, I'm going to create a nice geometric texture that we're going to actually V-carve into this look. And so let's take a look at some of the options that we have. Let's see here if I can pull up the screen. Let's see if it cooperates with me. Stand by, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, so one texture you know, that I could have band going across is this little hash crosshatch, right? Let it pull over and you'll see here. Minus the name, of course, but the crosshatch. So that could be a texture pattern that, you know, I might want on the box. What about this kind of diamond pattern? You know, what kind of, you know, the band of this diamond pattern here? Maybe, you know, this kind of like a little floral cross type pattern and things. What if I just want to run my texturing tool path, you know, down that band to get a little texture going down the middle of the box? You know, those type of things, you know, that hand-hewn texture type of deal. So, you know, we have some choices here what we can do. What I'd like to do is I'm going to do a very simple crosshatch to show you how I would go about approaching how to create the crosshatch for this. And how I would do is I would have my boundary here. I would start with a line and I would snap to this corner down diagonally to this corner here. Now I'm going to take and hold down my shift key and I'm going to stretch that line a little bit. Just so it goes past. I want my crosshatch to go past the box a little. Do I need to do that? Do I need to go past? No, let's not go past. We'll go right up to it. Now from here I'm going to offset this line. And I'm going to offset in both directions, inward and outward. And so I want to have an offset of, what do I want an offset of? Let's go, if my V-bit is cutting, let's go 0.15. And if I offset, I want to make sure, let me undo that because I want to make sure that if I do that, I select new. But see, if I'm going in both directions, it won't let me select new. So it's going to be a pain in the butt. So I'm just going to go in one direction, then the other. That way I can hit select new because all I have to do now is just click offset, 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 offset. And then if I click that starting line again, switch to outward, I can go offset, 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 offset. Okay? Now, those, let's not do that way. Let's just do this. Turn off my two boundary lines. Those items there, I'm going to group them together. And I'm very simply going to mirror them. And I'm going to flip, making a mirrored copy. I'm going to flip vertically to create that crosshatch pattern. And it's not going to be really a square crosshatch because of the way I'm drawing my line. It's going to be this kind of diamond crosshatch. You see that? Can you see that pattern emerging? Right? It's going to look sexy. All right. So now I've got these vectors here and all, but I don't need all these extra lines and stuff. So if I select both of these guys, both of these crosshatches here, and I group them together as one item, I can zoom in to my boundary, making sure those crosshatches, the crosshatch is selected first. I can zoom into my boundary, hold my shift key down and select that boundary last, and I can come over here and trim. I can trim by clearing everything outside of the boundary away, getting rid of everything outside of the boundary, or inside. I want to get rid of everything outside of that rectangular boundary, my band. So if I clear that, that leaves me with my crosshatch band. Okay? Now, because I have that crosshatch, I could very simply do the same thing, you know, here and on the sides and stuff, but I would be, me personally, I'd be a little fearful that the patterns wouldn't be exactly the same, right? You know, for all four sides, and you may not want them the same and all, but I do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group together this crosshatch pattern, G for group, or you can use your group tool. I'm going to double click it and put it in transform mode, and I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm going to grab and drag and snap it to the center over here. And to make sure it is centered, which it's not, if I hold down my shift key and grab that band last, I can come to my alignment tool and align to a selection. The last item, I can center that. And of course, always hold your control key down, not your shift key when you're moving over. So let's put that back over where we want. There we go. All right, so now we've got that. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take this pattern and I'm going to hold down my shift key or control key. Sorry, I kept saying shift, guys, and I'm meaning control. Forgive me. We were making a copy, so it's the control key, not the shift. It's the control key, guys. So I'm going to drag a copy down here, snap that in, and then while I'm still holding the control key down, I'm going to drag a copy here and snap that in. Now again, I've got to trim. So if I select my group here and hold down my shift key in that outer boundary, I can trim by clearing everything outside of that boundary away. Same thing here. Select this group, grab my boundary, and trim by clearing everything outside of that boundary away. So there we go. I've got the textures for the bands on all the sides. So let's go ahead and let's create a toolpath for these. Now the question is, when I create these texture toolpaths, do I select the outer boundary and stuff, or do I just select, the inner stuff? Well, it all depends on what you're doing. If I were literally V-carving this, where it's actually carving, in between the lines and things, not doing like a profile and stuff, then I'm going to select the whole box. Let's see what that would look like. Let's go into the V-carve toolpath. We're going to have a start depth of 0, no flat depth. I want that nice diamond cut, that nice V-shaped cut. I'm going to be using a 60-degree V-bit. A 90-degree would give me the same pattern but shallower, a shallower cut, the angle and all. And so we're going to go ahead and calculate this with the 60-degree V-bit. Now, it won't let me because they're open vectors. Okay? And I should have known that it wouldn't let me because they're open vectors. So I've got to mix it up a little bit. So let's actually we'll come back to how to do the V-carve on this. We'll come back to how to do the V-carve on this by closing off the vectors, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But let's go ahead and do a profile toolpath. I knew that was going to happen. Dadgummit. I could do a pocket toolpath. Nope, that's a closed toolpath requirement too. Okay, let's do a profile cut. Very shallow cut for this. I'm going to go a 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to be using my 60-degree V-bit. Now I will tell you, a 22-degree or an 11-degree V-bit, much finer detail will give you a little bit more depth, get it a little bit more depth and finer lines. That would look really nice. I'm going to be on the line for this, and I'm going to calculate this. I've got a duplicate vector. It's going to be ignored. That's fine. I don't mind it ignoring a duplicate vector. I'll find that duplicate later and get rid of it. So if I preview this selected toolpath, yeah, that'll look just fine. And then let's do the profile cut to cut the parts out. Yeah, that would actually be a sexy looking box. I think that would look good. All right, let's get rid of our waste material, and let's kind of zoom in and see what we got here. Now, this one, I really want to have a high quality preview to really represent what the cut would look like. So I'm going to change my simulation. Oh, it is high. All right. Then why am I pixelating so bad? Let me change to a different color wood. Let's go with maple, even though I wouldn't make a maple jewelry box. No, I'm trying to show something that would accent oak dark. Going back to cherry. Mahogany. See what mahogany gives me. Not bad. I got to go in here and get my own textures and all. One of these days I'll show you guys how to do that, how to add your own pictures and stuff into the application data folder. But we would have this nice V-cut diamond pattern kind of band going around the box and things, and I think that would look, that would give a nice feature and all, you know, a nice little band going around the box and all. Have your nice decorative feet on there, you know, your OG feet, lid with the maybe a similar pattern, you know, on the lid, and things. Yeah. All right. So guys, it's 8:52. We're about at the 9 o'clock hour now. We go from 7 to 9, and I was 7:15 to 9:15. So we got some more minutes and all. I want to do something on the top of the lid, and then I want to finish up, show you how to do the grooves on the back. So we've got probably about 20 more minutes or so. But right now, if you have any questions on any of this, now's the time to ask. Okay, let's focus on the lid for a moment, because there's a couple of things that we have to do. One, I've cheated already, guys, and I've created some textures already, and I'll show you how to make those textures and all. But I've got a diamond array texture here, and let's select that, and I'm going to use F9 to center it on my board, and if I double click on it and put it in transform mode, snap it to the center there. So this texture pattern, I'm going to show you how to make it and everything, but this texture and pattern gives us a really neat unique kind of look. I'm going to V-carve it real quick just to show you. Let's go with a, there's two ways to do it. We could do a V-carve without the border, or a V-carve with the border. I'm going to do it with the border. V-carve toolpath, no flat depth. I want a nice little diamond pattern in there. 60-degree V-bit. Again, a 90 would give me a shallower cut. But let's reset our preview. Get back into full view here. And if we preview that toolpath, you know, we would get this, you know, diamond pattern. That'd be a nice little pattern on the sides and stuff too. Now, what would it do if I didn't have the border when I did the V-carve? Well, it would cut the actual diamonds out, these little guys here and all. And so if we look at that, if we go back into that V-carve toolpath, and I have just the inner area selected, and I calculate that toolpath, it's going to give me a completely different looking cut. Let's come into here and all, and preview that toolpath. And now this time my main focus is the four-pointed star that's showing up, you know, in the texture and everything. And so, and I could, if I, you know, let's say I still wanted a nice little outline around the outer edge, not a problem. I can grab my border here. I can do a profile toolpath with my 60-degree V-bit on the line. I'll go with a small 16th inch cut, just it's going to give it a nice little border. And I could preview that toolpath to just get that little outline if I wanted to, you know, that chamfered edge. So that one pattern will give me two different looks. Well, how did we even get to that? How did we even get to that pattern? Well, let's isolate it. Let's ungroup this, and let's look at one of these parts. It's a very simple diamond pattern rotate it around 4 times. So if I were to draw this, let's what would be the best way to do this? A rectangle tool. If I go into node editing, if I pull this guy down here, this guy up here, you know, I get this hex, oh gosh, parallelogram look. If I didn't want to go, you know, that extreme, then, you know, narrow it down a little bit, come on back a little bit. You know, get your diamond pattern there, and then we're going to rotate, make a copy and rotate this 4 times. And so we're going to use the circular array tool, and I want 4 copies of this, and I'm going to be rotating. If I come over here and click on this point, okay, this is my rotate point here, and let me make sure that I'm in the right place. Where's my, I know it's on this screen somewhere. Where's my pivot point? There, ladies and gentlemen, it's hiding from me. Stand by a minute. Stand by. There's my pivot point. If you double click on the dot here in the tool, in the left side of the tool, it'll bring up your pivot point. And now I can drag and I can put it on that corner, right? And I want, that's going to be my pivot area, and I want 4 copies 360 degrees around, and voila. Now we would take that pattern and we would create an array of columns and rows of it to however, you know, however big or however many, you know, how many rows and how many columns do you want. No spacing between them, and that's just your simple linear array tool. No spacing between them, you know, to create this pattern. Okay, so that's one way to create a pattern. Well, what about even the flower of life, you know, pattern? A simple circular. Here, let's go with a circle. I'm going to go with a 1/2 inch diameter circle. And for this, I'm actually going to find my center, drawing a line there so it gives me a point to put my my rotate on. So if I come in here and select my part, click on my middle dot here, grab my anchor point, and I'm going to put it right here. And I'm going to go 5 times around 360 degrees. Now I can get rid of my line here. And if I offset this piece, offset it inward, I'm going to offset it inward a 1/16 of an inch, 0.0625. I don't want sharp corners. I do not want to delete the original. I want to offset, and I'm going to create these parts here. Now, notice what happened. it offset and created my inner geometries, but it didn't create them over here, 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 here. There's like a glitch, right? It's like, what in the world is that glitch? Well, it does happen. So we have to get those mirrored over. And one of the tools, or one of the options that we have in mirroring, is not mirroring, sorry. Yeah. Mirroring. Is flip about the line. Right here, it's grayed out. So let's make a line. So I'm going to come in here at my center point, and I'm going to draw a line straight up this intersection. Doesn't have to be very long. And I'm going to grab this part and this part, and I'm going to mirror those two parts about that line. And now that I have the line selected, I got that option. So that'll mirror them over there. Okay? So if I take my line, I'm just going to move my line down. I'm going to grab this part and this part along with my line and flip it over there. Get rid of my line. And let's see here. I'm missing this piece, right? So let me get a line in there. Draw a line from here to right down the middle of that intersection right there. Select this part, select my line, mirror, flip about the line, get that to throw in there. Now, for some reason, I got an odd man out. My 5 points around, I've got this guy, this void. He doesn't match anywhere and everything. So, what's up with that? What you talking about, Willis? What's up with that? Alright. And I don't like the way that looks. So, I'm going to mix it up. Bear with me a second. I'm going to undo everything I just did. And I'm going to rotate that around 6 times. Wonderful. I like 6 better. Gives me a better flower. Alright, one more time. Last time, hate to rinse and repeat. We're going to offset inward 1/16 of an inch. Create the parts. Of course, we've got, you know, missing pieces. Let's get those in there real quick, and then I'll show you what this looks like as a V carving. Let's go ahead and snap a line right along the intersection here. Select this part, this line, this part. Hold down your shift key, not your cap lock, Laney, and flip there. Take my line, select that line and that part. Always select your line last to turn the tool on. That'll get this one. Alright, no longer need that line. I got to draw some more. 1 more. 2 more. I'm going to draw a line here. Actually, here. And if I was smart, I could have drawn it all the way to the other side, but that's okay. Select this and this. Whoops. Always hold your shift key when you're selecting more than one item. To get that there, I'll move this down select this part and this line, get it there. Now this piece has to come over here, so I'm going to take and draw one more line. Oh shoot, I'm going to undo that delete, because I'm actually going to take this line, find the center of it, and move it right to the center, and I'm going to select this piece, select that line, and flip that top part down here. And one last piece, we got one last piece, so let's from the center, I'm flipping into this area, so I want to come right at that intersection right there. And if I select this part here, I should be able to flip it about the line and have it land there. Perfect. Now, with this part here, I have all these intersecting and overlapping lines and stuff. And I really don't want them overlapping like that. So, you know, I want them overlapping. I want this flower in the middle and things like that. But, you know, I can't have them overlapping when I create the V-carve toolpath, because it'll cause confusion in the overlaps and all. So what I need to do is take these 6 rings and weld them together. And then take a circle, find the center, and fill that circle in. And even though the lines and the shapes are not there, those overlaps, we're still going to get a similar pattern to what we had and stuff when it's carving between the lines and stuff. So let's V-carve this. I'm going to do this 2 ways. Number one, let me create I want to offset this outer line one more time outward, another 1/16 of an inch. And we're going to look at this 2 ways. One without the outside line, and one with it. So first, without the outside line, V-carve toolpath. 60-degree V-bit, calculate. Let's zoom in. And let's preview our little cut there. So we got this neat little ball texture, and then we could multiply this over and over and over again, just like we would multiply the diamond patterns and create this big mesh of very cool patterns. But now let's look at it and reverse it, basically by selecting both lines and creating a V-carve toolpath on both, with both lines selected. Let's zoom in here. Let's reset our preview and preview the selected toolpath. So now, this is a small little area here, and go deeper. Let's add a little bit of color in there so you can see that pattern. Not that color. We wouldn't color that black, like a red, maroon and stuff, so you can kind of get that pattern. Now imagine that pattern rotated around another 6 times, and another 6 times, another 6 times, and until you get this big kind of motif design going on. You can really create some really cool geometry with it and stuff. And so I'm going to take my part here and snap it back in here. Alright, so let's see here. Could you select the 3 correct offsets and rotate around the center? Yes. So what he's asking is if I undo, let me get back to where I was here. He's asking, could I take the offsets, and of course it was 3 earlier, it's 4 now and stuff. Could I take them and, you know, rotate them around the center point? So if I come in here and rotate, I'd need to go 1, 2, probably 3 times around, or maybe even the whole 6. But let's get our center point chosen first. And make sure I'm centered. All right, I am. And so I'll do the 3 times around, and let's see what that gets us. Okay, that fills in the blank on those 2. Let's undo that, and let's go 6 times around. Woohoo doggy. Oh, my the undo, my center point moved here. Let's get the center point back in the center. Oh, snap in there, boy. Girls. All right, let's go 6 times around that point, and there you go. All right, but what has happened is it has created some duplicate vectors. That's not a problem. Right click, selection, select all duplicate vectors. It'll select them. We can right click and delete. We can get rid of them, and that will fill in. So rather than doing the mirror, you know, and drawing the lines and mirroring the parts, we can rotate. So very good question, Larry. I'm sorry, Larry, and thank you, Dave, for answering that as well. And Larry saying only select 3. Larry, I would select all of them, so that because this outside part is actually what gets put into all the blanks around the outside edge. So I would select all of them, and then just delete the duplicates. That would be it for me. You know, it'd be much simpler that way. But yes, you could. You could absolutely do that. And so, you know, you could create multiple patterns. And again, what I was referring to is, let me get this on the center. Let me move this center to 0, 0, my 0, 0. Okay. And I'm going to offset it by half of its distance. So the size of this, my height, is 1 inch. So if I move it up relative to its position along the y-axis up and down, if I move it up a ½ inch and I click apply, that'll move it up to the bottom here. And if I take this part, I'll group it together. If I take this part and I rotate that around my center point 0, 0, because I'm at the 0 bottom left corner of my board. If I rotate that around 6 times, you know, and I can get even, you know, and then I can take and rotate that around another 6 times, that around another 6 times. But now I have a bunch of offsets that or I have a bunch of overlapping lines that I've got to get rid of and clean up and stuff. I've got some intersections and all to make the parts and all. But I've made, you know, this is a great way of making some very decorative trivets and things. And let me show you how I would address the overlap with all of those parts. They're grouped together. If I weld them together, I get this very cool, very unique pattern. And if I were to V-carve that pattern, I don't have a border around it. If I were to offset, let me do that. Let me offset this outward 1/16 of an inch. Now 1/16 is too much. Let's go 0.03125 a 32nd. And let me turn that off and hit delete to delete the ones I don't want. With this, I will first do this without the offset selected. We got to move it onto the board first. Let's move this to a new layer. Move to a new layer. And let me turn off everything except for that layer. Alright, so if I were to V-carve this, and I'll just use one of these tool paths here. Preview that tool path. I'm going to give it a little bit more start depth, make it a little bit more pronounced. So I'm going to go about 20,000ths of an inch start depth, 0.02. And let's preview that again, just to get a little bit more definition in the cut. There we go. So, you know, imagine a pattern like that, you know, all over, you know, across the top of your lid or something, maybe a square rectangle cut out of it where a name would go, type of thing. But let's take and do this without the outside line selected, and let's see what kind of different look we get. And let's take away the start depth. We don't need it for this one. And let's see if those little nubs, yeah. That start depth was getting rid of the little nubs in the bottom. And we'll give that a little bit of color so we can kind of see what it would look like. So all kinds of different ways to create all kinds of different textures, and when you think of texture, you may think of the texturing toolpath and stuff and all, but it's not just the texturing toolpath. And look here, you can notice if we look around this pattern and all, there's one of these little floral patterns missing right there. So if we followed our pattern here and we looked, there's one missing right, I think right here, actually, that one, because all of these are selected around. I'm not seeing it missing. It may be that one. And it really throws your eyes off. You gotta, you know, I'm following the pattern to see what's missing. Yeah, that little flower was missing right there. Anyhow, don't want to waste too much time on that, but you have so many different possibilities of what you can do. And now, because this has almost a hexagonal, wait, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hexagon? No, yeah, hexagon, right? 6 sides. I could take this pattern, hold down my control key, and you know, I could start building a completely different pattern, you know, of different shapes and things. That one's got to get moved down a little bit. All right, let's and you would probably want to group these together before you move them around, so that way you can come in and move them around easily without moving other items. Blah blah blah. Anyhow, and so patterns are they'll start to emerge and things, and you can really create some really nice looking stuff. Now, of course, this pattern is not going to look too pretty because the spacing is not 100% correct all the way around. This guy here needs to be moved up and over and all that stuff, but give you a general idea. You know what I mean, Vern? All right, let's get back to business now because we really got to get going here, guys. It's 9:22. All right, so hopefully you'll take an experiment with that a little bit. We started off with a simple 1/2-inch diameter circle, rotating it around itself 6 times, and then taking that, and rotating it around itself 6 times, and then of course, on and on and on and on. So, and then patterns start to emerge. All right, let's get back to our actual design here, our actual jewelry box. Let's finish it up. Let's go back to layer 1 and layer 0. Turn those back on. Let's get my diamond back over here. Now these diamond patterns, what we were talking about before I got into the tangent about other things and on how you would create this pattern and rotate and all that stuff, I went off into a real big tangent. These patterns and all, let's get this back over. But imagine that pattern with, a name in the middle. And so we've got, if I learn how to hold my shift key when I do things, hold your shift key when you're selecting more than one item. Oh, don't do that. Let me group that together. I hit the wrong key. Alright, so imagine that diamond pattern with, a nice little nameplate in the middle. Alternatively, imagine, let's take and group this together and get it centered on our box. And this is like a little 4-leaf clover. I call it the heart pattern because it's just 4 hearts rotated around each other. However, when it is V carved, when it's V carved, it almost looks like little 4-leaf clovers. But for like a Valentine's box or something, a heart pattern. Now let me take the rectangle out of the boundary, or out of the equation, the outer boundary. When I say the rectangle, when I'm referring to the rectangle, not the heart, boundary there. And again, you know, little heart box. Yeah, it looks like 4-leaf clovers to me, so it could probably pass for a you know, a St. Patty's box as well. You know, either or. Let's see here. Let's go back into our 2D view. So a floral pattern. This is just a variation of the diamond pattern, but with smaller parts. And you know, these small little floral ovals with a point here, basically arc, and then rotate it around with a rectangle turned at a 45-degree to kind of create that diamond pattern. And that, you know, creating a linear array, trimming that array to a particular boundary, just like we did the crosshatch and everything. You can create a pattern. This, once again, I don't know why that board always wants to tilt. Stay there. You know, a very simple little light texture. You know, nothing too deep or too extravagant. Now, if I were to take the borders out of the mix of the V-carve, again, borders, you know, what happens when we do this? What happens when we do that? If I take one of the borders out, and calculate that toolpath. And this is just ways of getting multiple designs from, you know, the same pattern. It just depends on what vectors, how you select them and things. And so let's look and see what we would end up with here. Now on this one, let me turn the color off. If I were going to do this one as a texture pattern and all with a box and everything, this particular one, I would limit. It's not always a great idea to go to the depth of the cut. You know, this is cutting almost 5/8 of an inch deep in these areas here. So I would actually create a flat depth. And my for a simple texture like this, I'm only going about 1/8 of an inch. You know, when calculating it, it's not always a good idea to let it just V-carve to the full depth and everything, because it just doesn't look right. So we want to add a flat depth in here and limit that cut and stuff, so that texture really stands out much more. You know what I mean? And you know, if we had let's come back over here and let's turn off I gotta keep moving. Go to floral 1. Let's look at a couple of more. You know, here's a combination of the box lid. Let's get this centered on the lid. You know, where you have some initials, and you have, you know, a name, you know, plate in there. Something to think about there. And let's see, what else do we have here? A different take on the crosshatch. Just instead of the diamond oblong, you know, the long diamond shape, this is the more rectangular shaped crosshatch pattern. And let's see here, crosshatch. Let's do the crosshatch with the name. And let's get that centered in there. Let's see if it's going to fight me. Sender. There we go. Alright, let's V-carve this. I'm not going to create any more toolpaths. I'm just going to just use the ones we've got. Calculate. Yeah, there's a suitable vector selected. What do you mean no suitable vector selected? Stand by. Okay, can't do that, so we've got to do it in two different stages. The name will be V-carved, so we'll do the box and the name. Oh, come on. I got everything grouped together, so bear with me. Ungroup. Do I have that layer colored pink or something? I do. That friggin' color was confusing me. Let me change the color of that layer. Bear with me a second. Thank you. So that I was like, why won't it deselect? Why won't it deselect? It was the same color as what the selection looks like. Alright, so let's grab the name here. That was throwing me off, man. V-carve toolpath, border, and name. Definitely going to do a flat depth of 1/8 of an inch, probably a 16th most likely, but I'll do an 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to use a flat area clearance tool of an 1/8 inch end mill. I don't know how much, I don't know if an 1/8 inch will fit in there very well, but we'll give it a shot. Okay, and yeah, not too shabby. And then of course the rest of the design, except for the name, it's going to be a profile toolpath because it's open vectors. The crosshatches are open vectors. There's no real way to, if I went through and I trimmed each one of these, joining these lines like almost like rectangles and things, and close them off, then I could do that. But my God, that's a lot of work. Why do that? Just do a profile toolpath on the line. Oops, what was my depth? Yeah, 1/16 of an inch is good. Get rid of that color. Now that I've chosen that color, it wants to always go to that color. But if we look here, you know, a nice little crosshatch pattern. You know, this crosshatch pattern, this is you know, typical for like knife handles and gun stocks and things like that. You know, that grip, kind of crosshatch pattern. It's the, you know, you would achieve it the same way. And the way we drew it is we draw a line and we offset those lines in both directions. And then we just mirror the lines and it creates that crosshatch pattern, just like we did earlier in the class. Very, very simple and things. Now I could change this up on the V-carve name part, which let's see here, which one's the name? That one. I could change that up and just, oh, no flat depth. I don't want a flat depth there, Halls. And this will be the last we'll show of this. So if I preview that toolpath, just a very simple V-carve of a name with our crosshatch pattern. You know, if I didn't want the raised text in there, however you want to do it. So hopefully this is going to give you some ideas and things. And of course, the actual box itself. And I'm using the inner boundary here of the box because I want a border around my box. I don't want the texture running all the way up to my edges. I want a border. No matter if it's a rough texture that I use my texturing toolpath or if it's something that I've drawn out vectors for, I'm going to kind of create a boundary, a limit for that. I'm not going to run it to the full lid of the box lid and stuff. And you know, with the box, it's going to cut, the lid's going to cut through 3/4. We're going to use a 1/4 inch end mill, cutting on the outside of the line. Again, we would create tabs for this. And if you guys want this file, I will make this file available for download with all of the different textures and things in there that you could actually, and I'll create some toolpaths of the real toolpaths of the finished projects and all. But now we've got to move along. There's two things that we have to do. One, we have to create our slot cuts on the back side of this project, our alignment pin holes on our board, and then we have to go into and create our mortises for our hinges. Now on the top of my board, on the top of the board here, this is going to be the front. Now my mortise is not going to go all the way to the front of my piece. I don't want to see the mortise, when I open the inside of the box and all. It's going to be limited and all. But I'm still going to be drawing on this because this is the outside of the box and the bottom side is the inside of the box, right? And my hinge, my hinge is, the lid's going to be hinging off this, and so the mortise has to get cut here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a 1 inch by 1 1/4 by 1 inch hinge, a set of hinges, jewelry box hinges or small box hinges. You can purchase hinges from places like Rockler, Woodcraft, and all that stuff, Lowe's, and all. But I'm going to start off with a rectangle and all, but I want to make sure that my hinges and stuff are in the right place. And also, I only need it on one, the back of my box, not the front, of course. So we'll make this the back here. And so I'm going to use a guideline. I'm going to snap to this corner here, and I'm going to make a relative guide 2 inches. If I'm going 1 1/4 inches, I want to be 3/4 away from the edge. That's 2 inches. I'm going to go 2.125 inches. Create that guide, and then close that. I'm just going to drag this guide over to this corner, right click, and I'm going to go a negative 2.125 inches. Okay, and that will give me the guidelines of where I want my hinge mortises to be. So I'm going to draw a rectangle here, and the rectangle is going to be, as I said, it's 1 1/4 inches is the hinge. So I'm going to go 1.25 on the width, and then the height. Well, the height just depends on what bit that I want to be using to cut this with, because the bit has to be able to fit into the profile, right? So I want at least 1/4 inch height. So I'm actually going to go 0.3. Okay, and now, when it's cutting, that router bit's going to be cutting in here, and it's going to be cutting away only the part of the box, that it needs to. Now, I may have to square up my edges and everything with a chisel and all, but it's just going to be a very small edge. I'll most likely use an 1/8 inch end mill for this because it's a simple mortise. But if I was using a 1/4 inch and do it at the same time I'm doing my profile cut, that would be fine as well. Now, you have to imagine you're looking at a side view here, and the router bit is going to be coming down from the top of the piece. I can get my 1/4 inch diameter bit in there. it's going to be coming down and it's going to be plunging in, and it's going to be cutting out a pocket here on the top of my board. And that pocket, how deep it is only going to be about a quarter of an inch deep. I'm sorry, it is a half-inch deep, not 3/4, half-inch deep. And that will create my little hinge mortise for the back of the board. Then I need to do the same thing on the back of my lid, but let's create this first. Let's get rid of this circle here. And so how deep I want my pocket, that hinge mortise from my profile to the cut here, how deep I want that depends on the actual hinge. I think I'm going to go just very shallow, and I'll use a guide to help me here. On that guide, gosh, how thick are hinges? I think a 1/16 of an inch should be fine. Shouldn't be too deep. So we'll go 1/16 of an inch. Oh, negative, negative, negative. There we go. Alright, we can get rid of that guide. We'll get rid of... well, we won't get rid of him yet. Alright, so my mortise is going to go here. And then, of course, I'm going to center it up here on my 2-inch mark. I'm going to hold down my control key and my alternate key and drag straight across until I snap to that guide. That'll put it in the same position. Alternate key keeps me on the same plane. Alright, so now I can view my guidelines and delete them all. And so these little guys right here are going to be my little pocket cuts. Now, it doesn't matter how, wide this is, because it's only this top little piece of the wood that's cutting. We want to make sure it's wide enough that the bit will want to go in and come in and do a little cut here, So, don't be stingy on it. It's all waste wood in that area anyway. So just give yourself enough. And let me show you what this looks like. We're going to create the tool path. And it's going to be a pocket cut. And it's going to cut a 1/2 inch deep, 0.5. We're going to cut with a 1/4 inch end mill. See, an 1/8 inch would give me a little less cleanup that I have to do with a chisel, but a 1/4 inch, since I'm doing a profile cut and stuff, I just don't want to have to change bits again, so I'll use the 1/4 inch. And we can calculate, and I'll just call this hinge mortise 1. Alright, let's reset our preview back to a blank board. Let's come in here and let's preview our profile cuts and our new little mortises here. Okay, let's turn off the color. I'm gonna let me zoom in. Let me see if I can get this rotated in a way that you guys can see it good. Okay, so what that does is it creates my little 1/16 of an inch hinge mortise. Okay, now because my router bit is round, I may have to do a little squaring up right here, but let's see how well I can zoom in with it and it stay pixelated. Because the router bit, is coming down and cutting this pocket out to a 1/2 inch deep, because it's round and all, I may have to just do a little bit of chisel work to square that up. And that's not, you know, that's not a big deal. As long as I don't have to do a chisel work and chisel the whole mortise out, let the CNC do it, that's fine. Because me and hand tools aren't that great. Now, let's focus now on the other side. On the other side, we've got two things to do. One, we've got to create our mortises, and two, for our lid, and two, we've got to create our little slots. Now, on all the slots, we need to hold down our shift key and we need to extend them out past the piece. Okay? We want a nice square cut there, and so we got to extend them out past the piece so the router bit will get, you know, it'll be a nice square cut instead of a rounded cut because, you know, the radius of the bit. So holding the shift key down keeps the pocket centered, and there we go. And for this, we select these four guys right here. They're 1/4 inch wide slots, so I can use a 1/4 inch end mill. It's going to be a pocket cut. It's going to be cutting 3/8 of an inch deep. That's how wide I want the slots. My 1/4 inch end mill, we're going to calculate that, and we can preview that toolpath. That'll create that slot there. Okay. Let's go ahead and get our mortises drawn in. Now remember, I went if we go back to the front side here, my lid is, there's no overhang on my lid. The lid is the same size as the box. So, you know, there's no overhang of the lid and everything. So my measurements, my mortise measurements and everything, you know, will be good. And this piece here is in line with this part here. They're directly in line with one another. So pretty much all I need to do is, if I take these two parts here, holding my shift key down, holding my control and alternate key, that keeps me restricted. No matter where I move my mouse, I can only, you know, move straight up and down unless I'm straight across. Then I can move side to side. Doesn't matter where my mouse goes, I can only move straight up and down or directly side to side with that alternate key held down. So I'm going to come straight down to here, and then now with those parts there and they're selected still, I'm going to right click and move them to the other side. Then I'm going to go back to my back side here. Alright, so now I got my little mortise pockets. Now on this one, all I want to do is, so I don't have to do any chisel work on these, all I want to do is on one side, not holding the shift key, just extend this past the profile line a little bit. Same thing here. Extend this past the profile line a little bit. So that way when that router comes, it creates, you know, the radius out here, and when my profile cut comes and cuts the parts out, it cuts that radius off and gives me a nice square mortise. So these two guys here is going to be a pocket cut. And this pocket cut is only going to be, again, a 1/16 of an inch deep. 1/4 inch end mill is fine. Calculate. And once again, if we preview the selected toolpath, that'll give me my mortise. And because I did do my profile cut on the front side, I'll show you a better way. We're going to do the profile cuts. We're going to do them half and half. So let me open this back up, and we're going to go 3/8 of an inch, 0.375 on this side. Calculate. And on the other side, where did my border go? Did I delete it like a goofball? Copy to the other side. Nope, that's the wrong one. Hold on a second. Copy to the other side. There we go. I was wondering where he went to. This is going to be a profile cut, also cutting through 3/8 of an inch. Now, let's stop for a second. Let's do this right, because this is the last toolpath. On this profile toolpath, we want tabs. Okay. So let me turn off the toolpath preview. Let me make that, hide that invisible. Let's go in here. We want tabs, so we're going to add some tabs. They're going to be, I want them only to be 1/8 of an inch thick overall, and it's going to be, there's going to be tabs being cut on both sides. So each side is going to be a 1/16 of an inch thick tab, 1/4 inch wide. I'm going to edit my tabs, and we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm putting them on the side. 1, because the edges are getting mitered, right? The edges are getting mitered, and so the tabs will be cut out, and so I don't have to be worried about sanding them perfectly, and I won't have to mess up my profile cuts. So alright, I need to add this profile into the mix and go back into that edit tabs. Alright, now this is going to be our final profile, side 1, 0.25 in mil. Calculate. Okay. Now that I've created that tab, I'm going to switch over to the other side. You guys are going to go, what in the heck is he doing? I'm going to select all of these boundaries here. All of these boundaries. And I'm going to delete them. Delete. Delete. And I'm going to go back to the other side. Because I've created, now that I've created a profile toolpath on this top side with these boundaries, I can now select these boundaries, and when I copy them to the other side, it's going to copy the tabs along with them. So that way the tabs are on, they're all in the same place on both sides. So now I can go back over here and I can create my profile toolpath. Let me select these boundaries. I'm on the bottom side now. And when I click on add tabs, it's going to put the tabs right where they need to be. Again, my tabs on this side are only going to be a 1/16 of an inch thick, and both sides together, that's going to make an 1/8 inch tab for me. So this is going to be my final profile side 2.25 em. I'm going to calculate this toolpath. Alright, let's look at let's preview all the toolpaths on this side here. My 3/8 of an inch cut. Okay. And then flip over to the top side. I'm going to go ahead and create, I'm going to do the one with the curved outer edge. So we're going to grab the profile and my swept OGs here. Let's preview them. And of course they would get carved in the proper order, not backwards, like the profile cut would not get cut first. You would generally carve them in the right order. But now, and of course I haven't made the box and all, but let's look at what we've got here. We've got our box sides and profiles. Our tabs are in the middle of the parts because we cut halfway through on one side, halfway through on the other, so the tabs are in the middle. They're floating in there. We got our nice little curved profile. We still got to do the lid and all. But if we flip over to the other side, we've got our bottom of the box grooves around our parts. We've got our box lid with our hinge mortise. You can see that hinge mortise there. I'm going to have to do a little chisel squaring, a small little square cut on each of the two corners here for that square hinge. And then let's look at, let's flip back over to the other side. And if we look up here, it'll be hard to see. The only thing that I'm missing is my hinge mortise cut from the front side. That way I've got my hinge mortise there as well on that front side and everything. And you know, all I got to do is take those 4 parts over to my chop saw or table saw and cut the miters on them and things, and we're done. Now the one thing, let's see here, let's grab a tool path with let's see what I got here, what I got for some pattern. Not that one, not that one. Let's real quick grab a select that and V-carve. V-carve toolpath. I'm going to go an 1/8 inch flat depth, 1/8 inch end mill, 60-degree V-bit. No suitable vectors selected. Now we got suitable vectors selected. Let's preview. All right. So all in all, you know, we could end up with, you know, a very nice looking box and things. And all. So hopefully in all of this talk of whether we create shapes to make textures or we create profiles to do sweeping with the molding toolpath to create curves and textures, whether we use the texture toolpath, you know, vector drawing patterns over here or the texturing toolpath over here, you know, we can come up with a lot of different styles, and we can, you know, it's not just, you know, shoot, you got jewelry boxes, cigar boxes, you've got, you know, humidors, you've got dresser drawers, I mean, all kinds of stuff. You can come up with all kinds of things, and you can apply these fundamentals to them and, you know, really come out with some really beautiful stuff. Add some custom feet to it, you know, it'll look really sharp type of deal. So I'll make sure that I post this file for you guys that you can download and play around with it. Before I do, every toolpath will be ready to run. It will be cleaned up. They will be named properly and stuff, and half of them will be gone because they won't be applicable. But I'll organize everything nice and neat before you get the files, like always. But hopefully you're able to pick something up. Now let's take a real quick minute. Let's do some Q&A. William Eldon asks, so what caused it to cut up to 6.625? I know you reduced it by using the flat depth. So what caused it? What he was referring to is that diamond pattern when I said that some patterns it's better to let me find out where that V-carve was. I think that's him right there. Yeah, I think that's him. Let me reset the preview. Let's see here. I'm going to turn off the flat depth and calculate that toolpath again. So I said, you know, there's times where, you know, you don't always want it to cut, you know, deep. And what it is because William, a V-carve toolpath, looks at the space between any two lines, and it calculates how deep it needs to cut for those lines to meet at a V. Let me see if I can get into a position where we can see that a little better. Bear with me. And so the little florals and the outer perimeters and all, it's cutting these areas here in between them down to a V. That's what you see, these little crosses and stuff here. And the depth, you know, is almost a ½ of an inch deep. And really, you know, you would want to limit that cut depth. You know, that it just doesn't, it doesn't look good this way. So you would set a flat depth, whatever whatever you would want it to be, and limit that cut. But the reason why it's cutting that late or that deep is because of the space between the lines. The space between those little lines, it calculates how deep it needs to cut for those lines to meet at a V. So now we have a square flat bottom there, because it truncated the V because we put the flat depth in. And let me change this to a maple so we can see better coloring and all. And we have that square flat bottom now, but if we wouldn't have squared it or flattened it off to the 1/8 of an inch, it would have continued cutting down until those lines met at a V. You're welcome, Chuck. So William, that's what caused it to cut to the 0.625 or the ½ inch or, you know, whatever, is because of this, how the V-carve toolpath works. Now, Chuck asks, you know, since the bottom groove only goes part way through the board, should they not extend past the edge so that the notch does not show on the outside? Well, Chuck, yeah, I'm assuming you're referring, real quick if you haven't left yet, I'm assuming you're referring to the bottom cut of the bottom piece. Okay? So, when I take my bottom piece of material, bear with me a second. When I have my bottom piece of material, if I were had a rectangle and I cut that groove, let me see if I can finish drawing this out real quick, bear with me a second. Stand by 1 second, guys. Just for a moment. So imagine I have my square piece and that groove is running all the way out. When I cut that miter in the end, you know, it's going to cut that groove down to where it needs to be because it's only 3/8 of an inch deep. That's, you know, my pocket's only 3/8 of an inch deep. So it's going to cut that groove right where it needs to be. So it will not be seen when you put the other miter in place. Let's look at the inside of this. You know, when you put the other, you know, the two parts together, that 90 degrees, it closes off, and it's not seen on the back. Oops, it's not seen on the back side of the board at all. And this line doesn't belong here, so bear with me a second. It's not seen on the back side at all because the groove doesn't go there. It's limited to that 3/8 of an inch. So hopefully that helps explain it. You know, you're going to be cutting that mitered corner off or edge off there, and so it's going to, you know, when it cuts that miter, that 45-degree angle, that groove is going to be, you know, here where it should fall, so that when those two parts come together, you know, it creates that little pocket area for my bottom drawer. Yeah, we're not doing a butt joint. If we were doing a butt joint, it would be completely different, Chuck. We were not doing a butt joint. So, with the miter, you know, with a butt joint, we would do completely different. We wouldn't extend. We would not extend those parts to all the way to the end. We would extend them 3/8 inch in from the end on both sides. Thank you, Dave. Let's see here. Dave, yes, Chuck, once the box is assembled, you won't see the groove. There you go. Dave Gatton jumped in and answered that as well. Larry, thank you very much. Aloha, mahalo. Thank you for joining us from Hawaii. So hopefully you'll pick up some little tips from this, and you know, come out and make a nice looking box or something. You know, show pictures in the Facebook group, the Digital Woodcarver Owners Facebook group. William, you came back with thanks. So a wider V-bit would cut shallower. Yeah, a wider V-bit would definitely cut shallower because it doesn't take as much depth for the V-bit. It doesn't take as much depth for the lines to get at a V. So if I were to use a 90 degree V-bit for that cut, then, and I reset my preview, let me make sure I took the flat depth off there. I did. If I was using a 90 degree V-bit for that, and preview that. So let it finish up and then I'll measure it. By the way, how you measure, guys and girls, or how you can determine the depth of the cut and all, one is if you put your mouse over your board at the very bottom left of the corner, bottom right corner, my right evidently, your left, just kidding. You see the number. So I'm working off the bottom of the material, so the top of my board is 0.75. If I come into this cut now, you can see that it shows 0.64. Let me get down in there. 0.634. So almost 5/8. So I'm about 1/8 of an inch deep. If I was working off the top, it would give me the exact measurement, but I'm having to do subtraction. So 0.6340 minus 0.75, roughly about 1/8 of an inch, a little bit more. And that's using a 90 degree V-bit. William gave me a much shallower cut than the 1/2 inch, 3/8 cut that I was getting and stuff. So, for sure. Baron, thank you. I appreciate it. Now, guys, what I'm going to do with this file is I'm going to clean it up. I'm actually going to create a finished file for you guys. We're going to create a couple of nice textures and stuff, and I will create some toolpaths. In the toolpath names, it'll say optional textures that you can use. You know, the actual profile cuts and stuff of the box itself, the parts of the box are all going to be the same, but you have optional textures and stuff to create a variety of different boxes. I'm going to give you the Vectric files as well as the toolpath files in the Vectric. They'll be all ready and renamed properly and all. And all you have to do is you can change names or textures or designs. Just recalculate your toolpaths if you do make any changes, of course, and you should always look at the toolpaths. Never take a toolpath for granted. Always look at it and make changes. And then, you know, I'd love to see some boxes, especially some of the nice contour curved boxes and stuff. You know, come up. So you guys making some jewelry boxes and things. Give the feet a try too. And if you need any tips on how to miter those feet, you know, I made a little jig to be able to hold mine because they are small parts, and you got to miter them. You know, and you know, a little mitering box, a handsaw is a little safer. It's actually quick because they're small feet. They're only 2 inches by like a ½ inch or 3/4 inch tall or something, 1 inch tall. I'm not sure. I forget how tall they are, but they're real small. So a table saw or chop saw might be a little hairy. But like a little miter box or a little, you know, pool saw or something, you can cut miters on there. Or you got to make a jig to hold the parts so your hands are aptly clear of the blades and stuff, and we can talk about that in the future. But hopefully this will give you something to work on and you know, to get away from the signs and stuff like that. Let's make some boxes and some pretty things and stuff. William, last thing here, we got based on where the groove was, it looked like the hinges were being cut on the bottom of the box. No. Better not be. Hold on a second there. William's saying that based on where my groove was, let me reset my preview. He says it looks like the hinges were being cut on the bottom of my box. So bear with me. He might be right exactly on that one. So let's find out here. So swept 1, 2, and 3. Hinge, mortise hinge. Preview. Visible toolpaths. You might be right, William. I might have put them on the wrong side. Good catch if I did. And that also, if I did put them on the wrong side, that also means that my curve is upside down as well. So let's find out. So we got that side. Alright, let me switch over to the other side here. And let's run these 3 toolpaths. And William is correct. My groove is on the wrong side. Sure enough. So that means I need to, these grooves here need to be positioned up here. So we're going to fix that real quick right here. My box is, these grooves are exactly 1/4 inch from the edge here. So if I come in and grab this guy here and move him, grab him and snap him to the corner there, and take and grab him and snap him to the corner there. If I take both of them and I move them, the top corner, these 2 guys here, let's do one at a time, relative to its position. Oops, sorry. X and Y, Y up and down. So we're going to go negative 0.25, negative 0.25. Go. And if I go into my pocket toolpath and I recalculate them, reset my preview.
Good call, William. I wouldn't have caught that. Yeah, I probably would have caught it when I ran it.
Exactly right, Dave. I'd have caught it when I ran it going, wait a minute. Got these holes. So get that flipped over. Let's go to the other side here. And let's click on my final profile cut, my swept profiles here. Let's grab our mortise hinge and let's see what we got here. Bear with me, I'm trying to find alright, preview that and that. Alright, preview all of those visible toolpaths.
Oh, my nose itches.
Yeah, I would have caught it when I ran it.
But good eye, William. See, William pays attention to everything. He's caught me on a couple of mistakes. A lot of you guys do. You guys pay good attention. I love that.
All right. Did a little crosshatch pattern this time. A little mortise there. Alright, so if we look here, those are the tops of my parts, on my side parts here. And if we flip around, my groove should be at the bottom. There we go. Excellent. Good call, William. Good catch. Good catch. Good catch. Alright, guys and girls, well, hopefully you liked this project or this class, and hopefully, you know, I know it was all over the place talking about a bunch of different things, but hopefully you'll be able to pull something from it. I want to thank you very much for attending tonight, and until next time, if there's no more questions, I'll give you a couple more minutes. I'll keep an eye on the chat if you have any more questions, but until next time, guys, I'll see you soon. Yes, William. Great job, catching on for sure. I want to see you making one of these boxes, William. Thank you, David. You tell me that's not going to be a sexy looking box when it's all built with those nice little feet on the bottom. Dave, thank you for attending tonight, Dave. I appreciate it, JB. I still think the name should be 180 degrees. Let me see here. Well, the name, yeah, it's going to be 180 degrees. It's going to be facing the other way. I didn't put the name in there, but you're right. The name would be 180 degrees as well. Good call, good catch on that, JB. Because that's the front, this is the front of the box. And when we have the box lid closed, we want the name here. We don't want the name facing the back of the box. And, you know, we could make that the back of the, we could just move those vectors up to this side if we wanted to, the mortise hinges. Either way, whatever side, just remember, whatever side, you know, yeah. So you're exactly right, JB. Another good catch. All right. Yep. You're welcome, Alan. Okay, guys and girls, I'm going to go ahead and call it off the class tonight. Thank you very much, and I will see you soon.